Hey noobs, Mr. Frog here. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Crimson Colosseum, a new HRPG game published by Kagura Games. Now, like with many of Kagura's other releases on Steam, the game will be censored by default. This can not only remove the H scenes, but also critical gameplay features as well. I strongly recommend to download and install the 18+ patch from the Kagura Games website before playing the game. A link to the patch can be found in the video details below. Now with that out of the way, Crimson Colosseum opens with its main character, Sachi, about to have her first battle within the titular Crimson Colosseum. Before they begin though, a flashback occurs which reveals how Sachi ended up in this situation. One day, Sachi was walking alone in the woods before she was suddenly surrounded by several bandits. These bandits kidnap Sachi with plans to sell her as a prize fighter in the Crimson Colosseum. Left with little choice, Sachi is told she will need to win 8 battles within a 20-day time frame to earn back her freedom. The whole plot is simple enough and easy to follow along with. Nothing is overly complicated, and the game will mostly be you training for and fighting to win these battles, with minimal story in between. You will receive the occasional cutscene where you converse with your other prizefighter comrades, as well as the occasional flashback to Sachi's past, but the majority of your time will be spent training and fighting. Despite this though, the characters are likable enough, and for what dialogue you do get, it is decently good for an H game. As for the combat in Crimson Colosseum, it's a bit different than your typical HRPG game. Combat is turn-based, with your battle options being a normal attack, a dice roll, defending, and giving up. You may be wondering what exactly this dice roll function is, and that is precisely what sets this game apart. The dice roll function is basically how you use abilities in Crimson Colosseum. You roll a die, and whatever number the dice lands on will determine which ability is used. You can set these abilities up prior to combat in the main menu. Here you can also purchase additional abilities and also upgrade to passive abilities as well. This function, while definitely unique, can be a bit frustrating at times, as it adds a small layer of RNG to the game's combat. In my opinion, this feature can either make or break the game for you, depending on how much you like this. Aside from the dice combat, the game also features QTE events where the player must press a random directional key to either avoid a grapple attack or add a counter attack. I actually enjoyed this part of combat probably the most, as it definitely keeps you on your toes and adds a bit of an excitement to an otherwise standard turn-based combat system. Now, aside from the combat, Sachi will be free to spend her time throughout the city as she pleases. This means that you can openly explore the city's different areas to either purchase equipment, eat food at restaurants for various combat buffs, and train to enhance your stats at the training center. Now at the training center, you can either train your offensive or endurance stats. Regardless of which you choose though, all of your stats will increase, but the stats that fall into the respective category you chose will raise at a higher rate. This training area is probably where you'd be spending the majority of your time playing the game, as it is probably the best way to increase your stats. Winning battles at the arena does also increase your stats, but nowhere near at the rate that the training center does. I think it's also important to note that this game features a New Game Plus system, and honestly, you will more than likely need to use this quite a bit to finish the game. If at any time you fail in combat to one of the main opponents, or if you fail to defeat all of the enemies within the 20-day time frame, you will game over and be sent into a New Game Plus. All of your items and stats do carry over between playthroughs, so I do recommend mostly focusing on training when you start out the game. Now, onto the real content of this game, the H content. The H content in Crimson Colosseum can be unlocked in a variety of ways. The first being random events that occur throughout the city. Occasionally, while out exploring, you will come across a character with a clock over their head. This means that you can start a scene with the character, and depending on your choices, these can result in an H scene. Now, some of these scenes can also result in a bad end that will send you into a New Game Plus, so make sure to watch out for that as well. The other way to get an H scene is by of course losing in combat as usual. These scenes will all be different depending on who your opponent is, so there's definitely a good amount of scenes for you to find and unlock within the game. Never worry though, because if you ever do miss a scene, they can all be unlocked regardless of whether you viewed them or not by beating the game and talking with an NPC at the end. And that about sums up all of what Crimson Colosseum has to offer. Overall, it's a fairly decent and enjoyable game with its likable characters, good dialogue, and charming art. I do, however, have a couple complaints, mostly being that at times it can be a bit repetitive, especially later on in the game when you've looped several New Game Pluses and you are still just training and training over and over again. The RNG in the combat was also occasionally a bit frustrating at times, but due to the relatively low difficulty of the game, it really isn't the worst. I would also say that the game features a couple more fringe fetishes within the H genre, such as water sports, and some especially strange content involving magical leeches that I will just leave to your imagination. This content could potentially be a major deal breaker for many people, so do be warned of its presence. If none of that content bothers you though, then more than likely you will definitely enjoy Crimson Colosseum. With that being said, while the game is a bit on the weird side, it definitely earns the coveted Mr. Frog mouth and sip of approval. Once again, thank you to everyone for all the support, and if you'd like to see more H-game content, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, make sure to check out the Mr. Frog stream over on Twitch. Later, noobs.